My name is Will Davis. I head up product marketing at Trifacta. My colleague here, Connor Carreras, is a customer success manager at Trifacta, specifically focused on the PepsiCo account. We were also supposed to have a member of PepsiCo's team to present with us. Unfortunately, there was a personal issue and Nick couldn't make it, but we have Connor here, who's an expert in everything Pepsi, and will be able to provide the details of their use case. So let's jump into it. So for the next 45 minutes or so, the agenda looks like this. We'll sort of give you an overview of Trifacta, what our company does, the problems we're specifically focused on, talking about the analytics stack at PepsiCo, so the stack they built on top of Hortonworks, Trifacta, and Tableau. Jump into the CPFR process at PepsiCo. Quick show of hands, who knows what CPFR stands for? Nobody, okay. Who's in the CPG industry here? Raise your hand. Okay, a few. Then we'll talk about the data wrangling process of working with both internal and external data, and then Connor will show a live demo of Tableau and Trifacta, and then we'll do a Q&A. So going into the introduction of Trifacta, for those of you here, the way value is generated from data is through all these consumption mechanisms, whether that's a dashboard, a visualization, a report, some sort of data product or recommendation, or a model. And that's supposed to be consumed by the organization to drive operational efficiency, more personalized services, better marketing ROI. This is pretty common. So, the focus of Trifacta is we want to drive more value from accelerating the preparation process. So if we're delivering business value at the point of consumption, if we were able to accelerate the process of moving from raw data sources, that's data living in disparate systems, internal and external data, if we're able to accelerate the process of discovering what's in that data, structuring the data, cleaning out any missing or inconsistent values, enriching data, bringing disparate data together, and then optimizing it for analysis in Tableau. It's been widely publicized that this process is over 80% of analysis process, versus the analysis that happens in these consumption vehicles is only really 20%. Who struggles with data prep here? Only a few people? Hopefully a lot more, because you're in a data prep session. So how are organizations doing this today? I think what we see in the market is people traditionally think that there are two options. You have a fork in the road. I either can go the route of ETL, where I go to my IT department, request access to data, or I try to do it myself. I have Excel, or if you're a technical user, you can do it yourself in some sort of scripting environment, such as Python or Java or things like that. And unfortunately, for a lot of analysts and a lot of organizations, this is a really painful process, given looking at these two options. When you're looking at ETL, given that you're probably working with an IT stakeholder, it's really slow. You have to go to that person, really write out specifically what those specs are, and then work into their schedule to get things done. And also, when you're giving that over to someone else who doesn't have context for the data you're working with, or doesn't have context for the analysis you're trying to run, they can typically make mistakes. They don't know what the business value of this analysis is being worked on. It's also rigid. If you have an attribute you want to change, or realize that there's something you don't want to see in that data, or another way to see it, that starts a week or month-long process to go through the entire ETL workflow again. And then also on Excel or do-it-yourself, who's working with data in Excel? How many times have you had challenges with version control, different macros that other users created, trying to share spreadsheets around? It's a really painful process. And a lot of times, a lot of that manual work leads to errors or just inefficient ways to work together across teams. And also, there are limitations around the complexity of data you can work with, or the scale of data you're able to work with as well. So our focus is, if you're able to put the data into the hands of business users, raw data, and have them be able to explore it, structure it, prep it for analysis, that's key to unlocking the potential. You have users who have the context around the data, how that data should be analyzed. If you're able to enable them to do this work themselves, that's going to drive better efficiency, greater analytic value, and also enable people to ask a broader set of questions across their analysis process. And a lot of this we think is because of the user experience. So if you look at the two approaches I was talking about earlier, when you have a scripting environment, you're relying upon individuals at your organization that know how to script in Python. How many people here can work in Python? Got a couple. How many people go to you and ask, can I get this data prepared? Can you help me do that? Are you a bottleneck in the organization? Pretty much. Would you not want to be a bottleneck? Okay. So, but you think of the broad organization, wouldn't you want to enable everyone who has business context around the data instead of a few individuals who know how to code in Python or in Java? And then from an ETL perspective, these tools, we're not going to bash ETL the whole time. ETL is great. Like if you have a data warehouse, you have a BI environment, and you have well-defined data, well-defined metrics, like I think that those are great systems and they're optimized to be able to handle those workloads. But if there's new data sources you want to pick up and you want to enable self-service analysis and more exploratory analysis, those systems are really not meant for the diversity of data that these users are working with and the types of users that traditionally would be running this type of analysis or prepping this data, which are the business analysts that we're targeting. So, what's required? I think if you look at Trifacta, we've thought a lot about how do we make this user experience applicable or usable from an analyst perspective. And the first way we focus on that is making it visual. So allowing people to actually understand what's in their data, see the content of the data, see any outliers or issues in the data that they can see just visually looking at it. Making it intelligent. So we've done a lot of work in our product to be able to embed machine learning to provide suggestions in terms of data we understand, how it should be prepared for analysis, or if you're working with disparate data sources together, what should be the join keys around those different data sources. And we provide a lot of intelligence guiding users through the process of transformation, as you'll see in the demo from Connor a little bit later, and using intelligence to help accelerate the process and show them what they should be doing as part of that process. And we also make it interactive. So every click, drag, or interaction in Trifacta leads to some visual feedback. So if you're able to split a data set, you'll see instantly how that split would impact the data. And you're seeing this constantly through this iterative process of how you're preparing data and getting immediate feedback as to how that transformation would actually impact the data itself. And also making it fun. I mean, how many people have a struggle in their organization getting people to adopt new technologies? They have to be fun to use. They have to be something that a user wants to open up every day when they go to the office and be able to work with. So we're really focused on making what is traditionally thought of as a really painful process, is data munging, plumbing with data, making that really fun and interesting for a wide variety of users to be able to take part in. And this is really focused on flipping this paradigm, where you have departments across marketing, sales, executives, HR, all going to their IT teams to prep data. And this is creating a tremendous bottleneck in the organization, whereas all these different departments, different teams have to rely on an organization or set of users to help prep all this data for them. And we're really focused on moving to a network of empowered analysts, where everyone across the organization can pick up data, transform it, and then prep it for visualization or analysis downstream. And the focus in there is if you're able to see the data for yourself, be able to access it, explore it, understand what's in that data, and then also help yourself in the preparation process. And we're doing that through this new approach to transformation. And this is just a sample taste for what Trifacta does, but you can see through every interaction, whether it's visually in this profiling interaction or through our transformer grid that we showed earlier, everything leads to a suggestion on how that data should be transformed. And this is enabling data preparation, exploration to be a process that any business user can do themselves. All right, so the additions of our software, we really started in the big data space. So we came out with a product in 2014 called Wrangling Enterprise. It provides unlimited volume and scalability. You can connect to a wide variety of data sources, both in Hadoop, in relational systems, cloud services, et cetera. And we have unlimited volume and scalability by leveraging parallel processing frameworks, and that's enterprise support, and it comes with an annual subscription. Then last year, around this time, we launched a free version of Trifacta called Trifacta Wrangler. And this is for anyone who wants to go to our website, download our software. It's free to use. It's somewhat limited in the volume it can support. It's up to 100 megabytes of data. And there's a lot of community support and training with that product. And yeah, it's completely free to use. There's no time limit on how long you can use it. And then a week ago, we launched a product specifically for teams and departmental use. So outside of the enterprise-wide deployment, but still able to connect to a diverse range of sources, provide enterprise support, and really focus on analyst teams working with data in the gigabyte or in the gigabyte range, trying to do data preparation on their own. All right, so that's it, background on Trifacta. I'm going to talk a little bit about the infrastructure and then pass it over to Connor to walk through the CPFR use case. So this journey at PepsiCo with big data and this new approach to analysis started over 4 years ago. They had a centralized IT team that was just getting hammered by constant requests for access to information and data prepped in a variety of different purposes for a lot of different business departments. So the team came together, both partnering across the business groups and the IT groups, to understand how do we set up a new architecture, a new set of tooling around that architecture to reduce these bottlenecks. And anyone who in this room probably feels that we, as an IT organization or as a team of analysts, we want to be self-reliant, or we want to empower users to be self-reliant and not have to create this top-down bottleneck I showed you earlier of everyone going to a single team or a single individual to prep data. So they created this unified data architecture really around a few main pillars: an enterprise data warehouse, a data lake with Hortonworks, data discovery and preparation with Trifacta, and analytics and business intelligence with Tableau. So if you look at the way these different technologies are focused on, I'm going to be focusing on the 3 pillars around Hortonworks, Trifacta, and Tableau. So Hortonworks, is anyone use Hadoop here or familiar with Hadoop? Got a few people, okay, good. Tableau selected Hortonworks as their common data platform for data storage and processing at scale. This is really focused on new forms of internal and external data, and taking that data, landing it in a Hortonworks platform and allowing users to self-serve against that data. And the CPFR use case that we'll be talking about consumes approximately 25 to 50% of the resources on that Hortonworks environment. Then they selected Trifacta as the standard for self-service data preparation. It's powerful yet familiar, looks a lot like Excel for discovering data and developing the processes to prep data for analysis. And this enables business users to get that 90% advantage of prepping data for analysis. And then Tableau as the standard for both corporate BI, sort of centralized business intelligence, and self-service data visualization and BI across the organization. And they have over 200 users, 59 projects, and 541 workbooks. And now the CPFR process that we'll be going over is completely self-service. IT set up the environments, administrators of the workload, but the business users are completely on their own to do that work. And so how this all fits together, you have ETL loading data in these different environments. So you have ERP, supply chain management tools, CRM, all loading into the enterprise data warehouse for the centralized business intelligence with Tableau. And then you have sort of the newer data sources, the data sources that users across the organization want to work with, such as social media data, machine log, sensor data, going into that data refinery that is Hortonworks. And then you have Trifacta as the common platform to take this raw information, explore what's in it, and then prep it for either analysis in Tableau or a variety of other analytics systems across the business. So this is showing that outside of your enterprise data warehouse, the well-defined metrics and BI that you've built, there is the sort of analytic discovery or the exploratory analysis that is happening alongside that for users to look at new sources of data, new combinations of data, and then once those get fully fleshed out, can also feed into your business intelligence system. So with that, pass it to Connor to jump into the use case.
All right, thanks, Will. So we're working with a really interesting group at PepsiCo. So it's the team called the CPFR group. And I know that Will asked a bit earlier how many of you know what CPFR stands for. And frankly, I didn't know before I started working with these guys either. But fundamentally, it stands for Collaborative CPFR, Collaborative Planning, Forecasting, and Replenishment. And so what this group does, their vision, so this is kind of their internal mission statement, is expanding collaboration with customers by leveraging shared data to enhance processes, provide best-in-class service, and create a competitive advantage. So that's a really awesome mission statement. What does that actually mean from a business day-to-day perspective? These are what they call the 3 pillars or the 4 pillars of CPFR. So you can see the different categories of work that they do. So in the planning category, they're working on promotions. So collaborating between Pepsi and the suppliers to figure out, okay, which products are you going to maybe put on sale or put in a flyer or an advertisement? And how can you promote those, and are we getting you enough product? As well as introducing new products and executing if you're bringing a new product or into a warehouse or a supplier or taking an old product out. Forecasting is fairly straightforward, so understanding how to plan based on seasons. Winter is often challenging for a supply chain, given different weather challenges that you might be facing. So how can you accurately predict how can you accurately predict if you're getting product to the stores, to the warehouses when it needs to be there? You also don't want product to spoil in the warehouses. And finally, replenishment. So this is specifically focused around store-level inventory management. So our group, the CPFR team, is using the combination of Trifacta and Tableau to accomplish these work in these 3 different categories. So the one pillar that I didn't talk about is this collaborative category. So the interesting thing about the CPFR team is that they sit between Pepsi and all of Pepsi's partners. So we've got a sample of some of the partners that our CPFR team works with in the bottom here. And if you've been in retail, you know that sometimes the relationship between the supplier and the retail partners can be a little contentious, especially if the number of products that are getting into the stores or into the warehouses doesn't necessarily match what you thought you were getting. And so the CPFR team exists in order to manage that relationship and make sure that the retail partners and Pepsi are all on the same page about what products are getting sent, what products are needed. So from a data perspective, what does that look like? We've zoomed in on Kroger. So from a team perspective, each individual CPFR analyst manages a number of different accounts. So you can, from a Tableau perspective, you can think, okay, each account, each retailer is getting a different dashboard. And fundamentally, in order to be able to improve business with these retailers, the CPFR team analysts are taking a collection of Pepsi's internal data and a collection of the data coming from the retailers themselves. So that can be things like shipment history, forecast, orders, production inventory. And they're blending that together into a single point of truth, what they call internally a master report. And they're then using this master report to drive the final visualization that the analysts are taking to their contacts at the retailers and saying, okay, here's what I put together. You can see, these are the trends. Here might be some problems where your forecasted orders, have a mismatch with our projected planning. So it's a really interesting process of actually using a Tableau dashboard in order to facilitate a better relationship between the customer and Pepsi itself. So a little background on why Pepsi started this process of building that single source of truth dashboard in the first place. Fundamentally, they're doing it in order to get a more accurate overall picture. So if you consider the data coming from suppliers or retailers, it may be slightly inconsistent with what you've got internally for various reasons, formatting problems, perhaps there's the retailer is reporting data at a different level of granularity than Pepsi is tracking internally. So standardizing all that allows the CPFR analysts to facilitate a more productive conversation about the needs and the supplies and the product. And as I said earlier, traditionally that relationship between the vendor and the retailer is somewhat contentious. And so being able to present a dashboard that represents both sides of that conversation, Pepsi's internal data and the customer's data, allows Pepsi to promote shared success goals. Because from Pepsi's perspective, ensuring that their customers understand the forecast and understand sort of the supply that is coming to them is important so that they aren't dealing with product on shelves that isn't selling, that they're getting enough product to meet their various promotions. And that, of course, rolls back and helps Pepsi. And what Pepsi saw after implementing the CPFR analyst process was that there was an increase in forecast accuracy, and retailers specifically saw reduced spoilage. So great benefit to having this analytics process. So there's actually two slightly different variations on this CPFR process. The first that we're going to talk through is the old school way. So this is what Pepsi was doing before they brought in Tableau and Trifacta and Hortonworks. So you see, we put together a diagram that shows the flow of data. On the left side of the screen, or sorry, on the right side of the screen, we've got the incoming multiple data sources, a combination of inventory, shipments, promotions, forecasts, and orders from both Pepsi and the retailer, in this case, Kroger. That's all getting landed internally at Pepsi on their traditional data warehouse server. It's ingested by Access. There's an initial set of structuring, enriching, and cleansing that was done by a single guy at Pepsi who knew Access. So you can start seeing some of the bottlenecks in this process immediately. You've got a lot of different analysts clamoring for their initial refined data, and you've only got one guy who knows how to use the tool. After the data comes out of Access, each individual analyst would open it up in Excel, do some final structuring, enriching, cleansing, and blending, and finally take the output of that Excel data wrangling and load it into Tableau. So a couple challenges with this process. The first is that in order to get the data ready for Tableau, the analysts needed to have a high level of technical proficiency, either in Access or in Excel itself. So what we've kind of mocked up on this slide is an example of one of the biggest challenges faced by Pepsi's CPFR analysts. So what you'll see on the left there, if you can point, Will, can you highlight the weeks? So you'll notice that each record represents a different warehouse. And going across horizontally are all of the different weeks. And then in a second column, if you can highlight, Will, where it says quantity 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, excellent. You'll see that the quantities are broken out. So there's no clear relationship between the week and the number of orders. So really, for Tableau visualization, what you want is this: one record for each week with the quantity associated with it. How many of you have tried to do something similar to this using Excel? It's really hard. I don't like doing it, and it drives me nuts. And what I often end up doing is just copy-pasting stuff, which is fine if you're working with maybe 20 records. But if you've got hundreds of warehouses that you're dealing with, copy-pasting can take hours. You could also try to write macros or VBA scripts, but now we're really getting into a high bar for what someone needs to know how to do in order to even get their data in a form to use in Excel, or to use in Tableau. The second challenge focuses around data quality issues. So I had fun putting this GIF together this morning. Question for the audience: how do you find data errors in Excel? Anyone?
Check filters.
Yeah, filters. You can scroll through like I'm doing in this animation, but fundamentally it's a manual process. If you think of the way Excel works, you have to apply a formula to every individual cell. So if you've got many hundreds and thousands of records, doing that is really time prohibitive. And since Pepsi's data is coming from external suppliers, and it's often actually input by various people in the warehouse, there's a high potential for there to be a number of quality problems that impact the accuracy of the final forecast. And finally, the biggest challenge with the old school Excel-based process is that it's very manual. So you saw that they used Tableau for vises still. In the first diagram that I showed you, it was very nice. We showed the ideal scenario, which is just 3 steps: Access, Excel, Tableau. Unfortunately, that's not the reality. So you can see that after doing that initial set of data prep in Excel, you take it into Tableau, you build your dashboard looks wrong. So you have to go back into Excel and try to address the problems that you saw in the dashboard, produce the dashboard again, take another look. Very long iterative process, lots of cycles in order to get your final visualization. Fundamentally, there's too many intermediate visualizations. You don't want to spend all your time making small intermediate visualizations when you could be producing your final lovely dashboard and talking with the retailer. So it takes much too long to design that dashboard. So here's the new solution, and it's a solution that resolved those 3 challenges that Pepsi faced. So you'll see that this is a much more abbreviated than our previous Excel access-based process. The difference in the front is that instead of landing on an EDW server, we're now landing into Hadoop, so can handle much larger quantities of data. After that, the prep, instead of being divided into 2 different applications, Excel and Access, all of the prep is now being done in Trifacta. And then finally, same as before, the visualizations are being created in Tableau. I'm going to jump into a demo now to show you how exactly PepsiCo was able to use Trifacta to solve some of their problems. This is an abbreviated demo. So what we're going to be going through are these 5 different tasks. So we're going to be looking at third-party data, which is the balance on hand or inventory data coming from one of Pepsi's suppliers. And fair warning, you're welcome to take pictures because this is fake data. It's not real Pepsi data. So if you're from CPG, maybe from Coke, and you're looking for some industry secrets, you won't be getting any here. The second step that we're going to be doing is around the data quality problem. So how do you identify mismatches and then fix them in a single step? Finally, splitting different granularities of records into multiple records, joining or blending multiple data sources together. And we're going to quickly run the job at scale, which you'll see happens in a couple of seconds, and export a TDE file. So with that, let's hop right into the tool. How many of you have seen Trifacta before? Hands? Okay, not many, that's okay. So we'll give a little bit of background. What I did before starting this demo is I actually imported all of my data into Trifacta. It's very easy, depending on your environment. You can either store your data in a relational system and connect to that, or upload directly from your desktop. In this case, I uploaded from my desktop. You can see these 3 different data sets are the sources that I'm working with. And each data set consists of the set of recipe steps that I'm going to apply to produce my final prepared or wrangled data set. So let's start with this BOH data set. This is the balance on hand, the data about the inventory that's coming from Pepsi's retail partners. So if I click on balance on hand, you'll see this gets opened up in the Trifacta transformer grid. Analysts working in Trifacta at Pepsi spend most of their time designing their recipe in the transformer grid. So you'll see when the data loads, it looks a lot like Excel initially. You see all of your records, all of your columns. But what Trifacta also does, and this is to help understand data quality, values distribution, is the tool generates a set of profile statistics on top of the data. This happens automatically and instantly, regardless of how large your data is. So you'll see at the top of the column, looking at this on order column, there's a horizontal bar. This is the data quality bar. And the different colors in this bar represent the number of records that are missing, valid, or mismatched. So we can see this red section, Trifacta's identifying, okay, there's 7 mismatched values. There's 7 values in this column that for some reason are not integers. If I click on that part of the data quality bar, Trifacta provides a set of suggestions. So fundamentally, when you're working with Trifacta, and this is why the tool is designed for the analyst user, somebody who doesn't write a lot of code, is the tool will take your input, and based on what you've clicked and what you've selected and what you've highlighted, it will propose a set of transformations that it thinks you might want to apply to the data. So it's guided data transformation. So after I clicked on those 7 mismatched values, you see I get a set of suggestions at the bottom of the screen. that operate on those values. What I want to do first, though, is actually understand what those values are. So at the top here, I can click where it says 7 rows and surface those 7 values that are marked as mismatched. So I can immediately identify, without having to scroll through all of these hundreds of rows, that the reason these values are getting flagged is because they include a comma. So I can very easily create a rule to remove this comma. All I'm going to do is highlight 1 comma. You'll see, once again, I get suggestions that apply directly to that element of the data. And what I'm looking for is replace. So you'll see when I click this card that says replace, the grid updates to show me what the result of that transformation will be. So it's finding the commas and it's removing them. When this looks right to me, I click Add to Recipe, and you'll see instantly the histogram and the data quality bar both update. So I've now fixed that data quality problem with this column. Even better, I did it in 1 step, which we can see here. I didn't have to identify all of those 7 rows inside this data set that has almost 1,000 rows and manually delete that comma. One other thing that I might need to do with this data set, if we take a look at this item column, you'll see that there's actually 2 distinct attributes in this column. There's an item number and an item name. When I'm visualizing this in Tableau, I really want to have these as 2 distinct columns, so that maybe if I'm grouping on item number, I can put my mouse over that, get a nice tooltip that shows me what the name is. So in order to do that, I want to break this into 2 columns. Once again, I can use predictive transformation. That's selecting something in Trifacta and letting the tool give me a suggestion to break this up into 2 columns. So if I highlight right on that dash, we'll see the first suggestion I get is a split. And in the preview, we'll see that this is splitting right after the numbers and breaking that into 2 columns for me. Maybe I want to go and tidy this up a little, rename some columns. I'll call this item number and maybe item name. You can imagine as well, let's say I want to extract some values. So something that's very challenging in Excel is identifying things that occur in the middle of a record and pulling those out into a new column. The cool thing about Trifacta is that I can train it to recognize patterns without having to write substrings, lefts, rights, trims. So if I highlight one of these numbers in the warehouse column, you'll see Trifacta actually builds a pattern for me. It says, okay, based on that selection that you made, I think you want to extract these numbers. And since I do, I'll accept its suggestion and add that to the recipe. So I could keep going with this, but in the interest of time, let's blend this with some internal Pepsi data. So one of the challenges that Pepsi's analysts have is that the UPC numbers, so this item number column that comes from the retailers, is not the same as Pepsi's internal number. So in order to do any sort of blending of those 2 sources and putting them in a single master report, you have to be able to map the retailer item number to the Pepsi item number. So Pepsi has a reference data, or a reference data set that contains a mapping of retailer numbers to internal Pepsi numbers. And we're going to bring that in right now. So in order to perform that join, that blending operation, I'm going to go down into our transform builder. You can see this shows you a list of all the different transformations you can apply. So when you're working in your data set, if there's something that you know you want to do and you just want to get a set of helpers to guide you towards that result, you can jump into this interface. In this case, I know I want join. So I'll click that, and I can select my item reference file as the object that I'm bringing in. The thing to compare this join to is a VLOOKUP, if you're used to Excel. Trifacta gives you a preview of the data that you're bringing in. A lot of times, if you're in an environment with a lot of tables that maybe you didn't create, there could be things named similarly. So we let you see the preview to say, okay, yes, that is actually the data that I care about. So if I click Select Join Keys, Trifacta attempts to automatically identify the best match between the two data sets. So it does this by looking at the distribution of values in each column. So you'll see that its inferred join key, its guess for which column matches across the two data sets, is actually right. It's item number from the retailer data and a Quickie Mart item number from our reference data set. I can now select the particular columns that I want to grab from each side of this. And then from item reference file, I want the 14-digit and the retail UPC. We'll see in the preview, I once again get to see all of these columns that I'm selecting. And when I click Add to Recipe, my data set updates to show me that combined set of records. So at this point, I'm done with my analysis. I'm ready to actually start working on this in Tableau. In order to do that, I'm going to generate a TDE file. So I'm going to click this button called Run Job, choose CSV as a publishing option. And in a moment, what we'll see Trifacta generate for me is an exportable TDE file. So if I click on this Export Results button, you'll see up here I've got a Tableau TDE option. When I click that, I get a TDE on my desktop, which I can open up immediately. And when Tableau loads, I can start designing a dashboard. Come on. OK. So this looks very familiar to everybody. So you're seeing your now cleansed data, and you can go in and start creating your dashboard. Instead of trying to create this complex dashboard live for you all, I took a screenshot of Pepsi's dashboard. This is a lot easier to understand. So what we've got here is Pepsi's dashboard that combines the customer data with Pepsi's internal data into a single analysis so that that analyst can perform a conversation between Pepsi and the retailers. So in the upper left, Will, do you have the pointer? Upper left, we've got a viz that compares Pepsi's forecast to the actual orders that the customer placed. So what we've got here is a set of historical data, as well as the current number of cases that are on order. And we've also got projected shipping at a future date. So sometimes Pepsi gets orders in advance of when they're actually being placed. In the upper right, we've got the customer's forecast, the customer's inventory at each distribution center. And you've actually got also some info about point of sale data. So the point of sale data is this blue line. So this is giving the customer a very quick understanding of what their data looks like. So it's not a combination of the customer data and Pepsi's data, but drilling in specifically to what the customer's inventory looks like. Bottom left, Will? So this is I like this one a lot. This is a heat map by product pack size. So it's comparing what the customer's forecasted to what Pepsi has forecasted. And then coloring in red any of the products where that forecast differs by 20%. So that indicates that there's some sort of issue either on the customer data side or the Pepsi data side, or maybe just some information that hasn't been passed. Maybe a customer is doing a promotion that they're projecting that they haven't told Pepsi about, so the forecast is off. And then finally, in the bottom right, we've got raw data by UPC code. So this is Pepsi's internal data. At the top, very top, you'll see some filters. So as the analyst is having the conversation or sort of exploring the data, they can apply different filters, change unit of measure, maybe look at the heat map comparison, and even increase or decrease the variance for that heat map. So maybe you are interested in seeing where there's a 5% difference between the forecasts. You can tweak that. So it's kind of a neat dashboard. So what are the benefits of this solution? So I showed you the dashboard. I showed you a little bit of the Trifacta data wrangling process. What are the actual tangible business and technical benefits for Pepsi once they adopted this solution? So the two numbers that Pepsi gave us for their business benefits, our reporting time has been reduced by 70%. So in an industry like CPG, where it's very important to respond quickly to trends and get your forecasts accurate immediately, being able to reduce your reporting time by that much allows you to respond much more quickly to changes. Second, we've got a statistic about build time. So this is the time to create that initial dashboard. So reporting time is month over month. I'm getting my new data, I'm designing my new report, maybe tweaking things a bit, and then making business decisions. Build time is that initial design. So I know this is a dashboard I want, let me manipulate my data to get there. And that's been reduced by 90%. So if you remember that slide that showed all of those intermediate Tableau visualizations, all of that's been cut out. Finally, technical benefits. The self-service data wrangling tool has removed that IT bottleneck. That was that one guy who knew how to code and access. Instead of depending on him for all of the data prep, analysts are now doing that themselves. And finally, data problems are surfacing immediately with those data quality bars and the histograms, instead of having to scroll through hundreds of thousands of records in Excel. And here's the money slide. So what does all this mean for Pepsi? It means that the CPFR teams are now able to respond more quickly to sales trends and adjust their forecasting and inventory distribution. So that combination of self-service data wrangling and Tableau visualizations has enabled the CPFR team to do their jobs better and to help Pepsi make more money.
Great. Thank you, Connor. All right. I know not everyone might want to stay for questions, but just for some follow-up items, we have a booth in the second conference hall further down, number 507. So if you want to talk to Connor or I or a member of our team, we have live demos. We can answer any questions. As I mentioned before, we also have our free product. And if you want to go to that URL, feel free to go download it, start using it, get us some feedback, and get experience with Trifacta immediately today. So with that, I guess it's a small room, so people can just raise their hand and ask questions for a little bit, and then we can do personal questions. So anyone have questions to start?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Can you create a template to catch a field that goes over 2 lines?
To catch a field that goes over 2 lines. So what exactly do you mean by that?
So the data extract that I have, one of my fields goes over 2 lines.
Okay.
Line break? Yes.
Yeah, so you can catch that. There's 2 different places where you could deal with that. One is when the data is initially imported into Trifacta, you can configure where those line breaks are. So you can say, okay, instead of breaking on every new line character, do new line and carriage return or something like that. If that still doesn't resolve the problem, we do support cross-row functions, things like windows and aggregations, that would allow you to roll that single line record back into, or that double line record back into one. Yep.
What's the time frame you're talking about for this project, from the time you met the Pepsi team to the time this was implemented?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the initial, it's gone through many iterations, but that initial build out was probably around a month. And then past that point, it's just been sort of continuous refinement.
Yeah, one of the nice things about working with Pepsi is that once we've gained success with this one CPFR team, we have teams all over the world that want to take this process and implement it in their own situations. So teams from Mexico, Europe, it's been really great to see it expand virally throughout the organization.
Yeah, there's sort of been a single power user analyst who goes to his friend and says, hey, I've got this awesome process that would help you a lot. Let me show you how it works.
Yeah. One challenge there is we're trying to capture who's actually using, and there's a lot of users that we probably aren't charging Pepsi for. So, yeah. Yep.
When you have that completed program, right, with Trifacta, is that easy to share between, it's easy to share between different users and apply it to different?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so one of the things we've recently released is the ability to see a full flow. If you have multiple recipes across multiple data sets, you can actually see that holistically and also share that with other users. And individual recipes are also shareable as well.
Is that possible to the final data set, the final data craft, is that possible to export to sources other than extract or CSV?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So one of the nice things about Trifacta is that we support diversity in and also diversity out. So we have a lot of standardized connectors to relational systems, web services, and things like that. We also have open APIs on both sides. So if you have a custom connection that you want to build, that will enable you to do that as well.
Yeah,
On your example, that was like a single retailer.
that was a single retailer, yes.
So what happens when you have multiple retailers? Is that manual process each time? Or
That's a good question. So depending on, one of the challenges that Pepsi faces is that each retailer's data looks slightly different when it comes in. So there's likely elements of that process that can be reused, particularly the pieces that apply to Pepsi's internal data. So all of the recipes that I showed you can be copied inside a user account, and you can just change the data source that that recipe is being applied to. So that can capture a number of the initial challenges, but if, say, the data coming from Walmart looks completely different than the Kroger data, you will have to go in and sort of refine that recipe and make changes that address specifically the Walmart problems.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, we try to automate as much of the process as we can, but Connor's example, data that you don't control always comes to you in a variety of formats, and if you don't get eyes on the data, you're not going to be able to understand how it needs to be prepped effectively. So we do support a lot of repeatable processes, but a lot of times, given that that data is totally external to your organization, you have to get eyes on it too. Yeah.
Yes.
Data wrangling at this scale. So if you have a pretty large data set, does Trifacta operate in memory, or does it issue MapReduce?
So there's options. We support multiple execution engines. So depending on the scale of your data and how beefy your system is, you can either use our proprietary engine that's called Photon that runs in memory on a single server. You can use Spark if you want in memory sort of at a larger scale, or if you're on a Hadoop cluster, you can push down into MapReduce and get that distributed computing processing. So there's lots of flexibility, and you're able to pick on demand, okay, I know this is a really big data set, it's gonna run for a long time and take up a lot of memory, let me do that in MapReduce, versus what I ran just now was in Photon. It was under 1 gigabyte. I knew that putting that in memory, I'd get response in a second.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about Trifacta is like whether you're working with data on your desktop, data at immense scale, like the user experience is exactly the same for end users. So like they don't understand what's under the hood or how big the data is. They're just doing their simple interactions and things like that. Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing is that the recipes you're building in the tool compile down to a number of different frameworks. So that could be running on your desktop, running at a single server, running in parallel on Spark or MapReduce. One of the other engines we're going to support is like cloud processing. So Google Dataflow is also an engine that we'll support as well. So it allows us to add support for engines as they gain popularity and gain use cases that are around them, so we can add them in. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's future-proofing basically by allowing that user to design, a common set of data transformation steps, and then apply that to any number of different execution environments.
Yeah.
Quick question. You spoke about automation, right? In this case, you've created the recipe for Kroger. So
Yep.
next time, do they drop the file in a particular folder? And what happens if there are new issues? Where is the automation piece coming in there?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So Pepsi doesn't 100% automate this process because since the data is external, they want to make sure that every month they're able to load it into Trifacta, look at it again, and make sure everything's right. So their process is, I would call it semi-automated. What they're doing on a regular basis is swapping that data source in, applying the recipe to it, and running the job. Some of our other customers are doing that fully automated process. Generally, when all of the data coming in is known and the schema is much more slowly changing. In that case, we have a command line interface that you can incorporate into an existing enterprise scheduler and sort of run the job in an automated manner, parameterize your inputs and your outputs. So.
Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of curious. So, like, one of the examples that you showed was basically a lunar account from a value that's over 1,000, right?
Yep.
But, so, I guess one of the questions that I would have on that is, what if there was a comma inside something that was under 1,000, right? If it was like 9, 5, 2, where it's, maybe that's just a
Yeah. So the data quality bar would pick that up because any value that had a comma in it was recognized by the quality bar. And so you can specify the transformation of how you want to clean up that column depending upon the specific row it's in. Yeah.
So it's not necessarily, I got the point. Right, you were just telling me to remove the comma.
Yeah.
So at 9,52 would then change transition to 952, not necessarily
Yeah.
fly-based pages is invalid.
Oh, right. So maybe there's like a missing zero or something like that. Or, yeah.
So you're able to define conditions.
Yeah.
So what I was demoing today was just the very basic, most simple case. But if you do have circumstances where you only want to remove a comma from something that's 4 or more digits, you can add an if into that statement. So choose the comma, select the replace card, and then hit modify, and actually tweak the script directly. So we're getting into a little bit more of an advanced user paradigm where you know the operation that you want to perform, and it has different boundaries, like only do this if another condition is true.
That sounds like my sort of follow-up question to that, because you said the script, and that's, you could see the script that was being generated as you were going through transformations on the right side there. So that is something that you could then just modify directly.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can show you that right now just for kicks.
What is that, I mean, is that, like Python script, or is that something specific for?
It's our own Wrangling language. Yeah. It's a domain-specific language specifically for transformation. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can see in here, this is probably not the best option. But if you look at the transformation, as you're completing this, this is where you would edit the script, and you get helpers that tell you if you want to change this. This is what that particular parameter does. If I look in here, I've got some information about the patterns. Maybe I want to constrain this. So starting after. So you can use regular expressions. You can use string patterns. And you can also use what we call trifacta patterns. So these are more human-readable versions of regular expressions. Yeah. And the interface can walk you through sort of the patterns that you have and what each of those mean. So it's making it very easy for an end user to design regular expressions essentially on their own.
Yeah, and then once you get advanced that you don't need all this guidance, we just have an editor mode that you can just jump in and just do this all yourself without a lot of this guidance. So, or you can just go directly into the script itself. We try to, given that we have users of varying skill levels, we want to remove the scripting as much as possible so they don't feel like they're intimidated by it. But if once you learn the language and once you learn how the tool works, jump in as you feel free to.
Yeah. So we do have a number of different levels of users in Trifacta. Generally, when you're first getting used to the product, you're doing a lot through predictive transformation, letting the tool tell you what you might want to do. As you get better at understanding the language, you'll jump into the builder interface where you get sort of guided help in composing that. And our power users actually go straight into the script line and start typing it themselves.
Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? All right.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.